Rows of locomotives sit motionless in a storage yard under a gray morning sky, paint still bright, barely worn from years of use. Most engines their age would already show clearly. A few hundred yards away, older locomotives built a decade earlier roll steadily past, hauling freight through the yard, doing the exact job the newer machines were specifically bought to do instead of them. Union Pacific spent millions of dollars apiece on these advanced new locomotives, built specifically to meet strict new emissions rules, and replace aging equipment across a fleet stretched over tens of thousands of miles of track nationwide. A meaningful share of them ended up parked instead, sitting idle for years at a stretch. Years later, Union Pacific remains the only railroad in the entire country still willing to run this particular locomotive at all. Let's get into it right here on Small Things. What a locomotive is supposed to do. A modern mainline locomotive isn't purchased the way a company buys office furniture or a delivery van meant to last only a few years before getting replaced entirely. It's a multi-million-dollar asset expected to earn its cost back over decades of continuous, dependable service, hauling freight reliably enough that a railroad can build an entire operating schedule around it, consistently showing up for work. When a railroad buys new locomotives specifically to replace older units nearing the end of their working life, the new machines are expected to match or beat the reliability of what they're replacing, not fall meaningfully short of it. That basic expectation is exactly where this particular story starts to go sideways rather quickly. A deadline, not a whim. It did not begin with a locomotive that failed on the road somewhere. It began with a regulation that changed what every new locomotive built in the country was legally allowed to be, years before Union Pacific ever placed a single order for the new design. Starting in 2015, the EPA's Tier 4 emissions standard took effect, and it was strict enough that the engine powering the previous generation of mainline locomotives could no longer be legally built for domestic use at all. Manufacturers across the industry had to design something genuinely new from the ground up just to keep selling freight locomotives inside the United States going forward. Electromotive diesel developed its answer to that new regulatory requirement, and Union Pacific became the launch customer, the first and by far the largest buyer willing to bet on the redesigned engine at genuine operational scale rather than in small pilot numbers first. It was framed internally as a straightforward fleet upgrade rather than a risky experiment of any kind, a chance to modernize a major piece of the roster while meeting the new emissions rules well ahead of any looming deadline pressure elsewhere in the industry. Deliveries began in late 2016 and continued for roughly 2 years afterward without much interruption, with dozens of units arriving steadily to take their place alongside the older locomotives they were meant to gradually replace across the network over time. Union Pacific's order dwarfed anything else in the industry at the time, running well past 1,000 units once the contract was fully signed. More new locomotives committed to a single, unproven design than any railroad in the country had ever purchased at once before. Trade publications covering the order treated it as a genuine milestone for the whole industry, proof that Tier 4 technology could scale up to a major freight carrier's actual daily operations rather than staying confined to smaller pilot fleets elsewhere. Nobody involved in placing that order was betting on a fringe supplier or an unproven manufacturer either. Electromotive had been building locomotives for Union Pacific for generations, and that track record was part of what made the size of the bet feel reasonable at the time. More parts agreeing every time. So what actually went wrong between a locomotive meeting emission standards on paper and that same locomotive holding up under daily freight service? Meeting a stricter emission standard doesn't just mean burning fuel more cleanly at the engine itself under normal conditions. It means adding real physical hardware to handle that job, equipment that treats the exhaust after combustion and constantly measures what's coming out of it to keep everything within legal limits at all times in every possible operating condition the locomotive might encounter. Every added system needs sensors feeding it information continuously, software interpreting that information correctly in real time, and physical components that all have to agree with each other perfectly every single time the engine actually runs out on the road. A locomotive that's simpler mechanically has fewer places for that agreement to break down somewhere along the chain of equipment. A locomotive built specifically to satisfy a considerably stricter emissions standard has substantially more of them, layered directly on top of everything a locomotive already had to get right just to move a heavy train safely down the track. On a passenger car, one malfunctioning system usually just means an inconvenient repair bill and a trip to the shop sometime that week. On a railroad, it means something considerably more disruptive than that across the whole network. A single locomotive that shuts down mid-run doesn't just stop itself somewhere along the route. It can strand the entire train it's pulling in place out on the main line, force a railroad to scramble replacement power from somewhere else on short notice, and create delays that ripple outward into every other train scheduled around that same stretch of track that day. Reliability on a railroad isn't a nice feature layered on top of the actual job. It's close to being the entire job itself, since a locomotive that can't be trusted to run threatens the tightly scheduled system built entirely around the basic assumption that it will show up and perform exactly as expected every single time it's called on. A pause, not an ending. It's tempting, looking back now with the benefit of hindsight, to treat the reliability problems that eventually surfaced as something that should have been obvious from the very beginning, as though anyone paying close enough attention could have predicted exactly how the new emissions hardware would behave under real, sustained freight duty. A genuinely new engine design built around a brand new regulatory requirement doesn't come with a reliable track record anyone can actually consult in advance, precisely because nobody has run it at real operational scale yet at the point the order gets placed. The problems that eventually surfaced weren't really a failure of foresight so much as the ordinary, largely unavoidable cost of actually being first. The same cost every early adopter of genuinely unproven technology tends to pay somewhere along the way, in one form or another. It's also easy to assume that locomotives pulled into storage are simply abandoned outright, quietly written off and forgotten about, somewhere on a backtrack for good. A meaningful share of the fleet has actually been pulled back out of storage over the years that followed, returning to active service following software updates and other targeted fixes aimed directly at the specific problems crews kept reporting in the field. Storage wasn't automatically the final chapter for every single unit that went into it. For some of them, it was clearly a pause rather than an ending, while engineers kept working steadily on the underlying reliability problems rather than simply writing the entire program off immediately after the first wave of trouble. The people still working the problem. Deep inside a major maintenance shop on a slow overnight shift with hours left before dawn breaks over the yard, a mechanic pulls up the same recurring fault code on a locomotive that cycled through the shop more times this year than any comparable unit built a decade earlier, running through the same diagnostic steps out of practiced habit built up over months of repetition on this exact model, building tomorrow's train assignments at a terminal desk late in the afternoon before the shift change, A dispatcher quietly routes around a specific locomotive still flagged from a shutdown the week before, preferring older, less advanced equipment instead for a route where a mid-trip failure would be especially costly and difficult to recover from quickly under pressure. At a different major railroad's headquarters a few states away, in a conference room full of procurement staff, an executive reviews Union Pacific's early experience with the new locomotive type carefully before finalizing a pending equipment order of their own already sitting on the table, ultimately deciding to cancel it entirely and wait for a more proven alternative instead of moving forward blindly. At a training center away from the main line, a group of engineers already qualified on the previous generation of locomotives sits through several extra days of instruction specifically built around the new model's unfamiliar warning systems, learning which alerts genuinely demand an immediate stop and which ones a crew can safely note and keep rolling through, a distinction nobody needed to teach on the simpler machines they'd spent their whole careers running before this one arrived. The only one still willing. A locomotive doesn't earn its value by being new, expensive, or compliant with whatever the latest regulation happens to require that particular year. It earns its value by showing up for work reliably enough that an entire railroad can build a working schedule around trusting it completely, day after day. Union Pacific's advanced new fleet was supposed to be the answer to a regulatory deadline and an aging roster at once, solving both problems in a single sweeping order. For a meaningful share of those locomotives, the answer instead became years spent parked in storage while older machines quietly kept doing the job they were meant to replace. No other railroad in the country has placed an order anywhere close to that size for the same design since, and that quiet absence says considerably more than any sales brochure ever could. If this changed the way you look at a locomotive sitting quietly in a storage yard, let us know in the comments below what you want us to explore next in a future video. We might make it our next episode. Thanks for watching. History often hides in the smallest details.